Let's cross to Kristy McSweeney, Managing Director of PR Counsel in Melbourne. This debate's going to catch Labor out, isn't it, Kristy? They can't deny the facts. Nuclear stacks up in so many other countries. Why wouldn't it stack up in Australia?
Look, we've got two clashes of ideology here at the most extreme cases. As we know, the left of Labor, we know it's a left-dominated caucus at the moment. We know the left have the numbers at National Conference, we've just seen, furiously opposed to opening the door for nuclear. All the coalition is saying is let's lift the moratorium, let's have the conversation, let's see how nuclear can be part of our technology mix. It's very obvious to anybody who looks at the economics of nuclear that it does make sense as Australia tries to get to net zero. And it's also very obvious that we're not going to meet those targets that have been set out by relying on solar and wind power alone to replace baseload energy costs. The coalition isn't saying let's replace coal with nuclear and forsake all renewables. They're saying let's throw it into the mix, lift the ban and have a conversation in terms of how it can fit into Australia's energy mix.
Well, Rebecca Nold there was saying that 300 megawatts would satisfy South Australia and stabilise the grid there. That's one of these small modular reactors. That's what they ought to do, is whack one of those in Port Augusta or something like that, plug it into the grid and see how it goes. And if it goes well, as we all expect it will, the whole country could eventually follow suit. Let me go now to Peter Dutton, because he's been pretty strong on this today, talking about Chris Bowen.
Chris Bowen, frankly, is unhinged on all of this at the moment. Chris Bowen did numbers before the election, and he promised Australians on 97 occasions that he would bring power prices down by $275. I mean, has anyone's power bill gone down by $275 under Chris Bowen? No.
Indeed, this is the thing, Kristy, isn't it? Chris Bowen and, for that matter, Jim Chalmers and Anthony Albanese, their numbers on energy haven't been good thus far, have they?
Well, look, that's not the language I probably would have used to describe my parliamentary colleague, but there's a lot of language that's been going around the last couple of weeks, Chris, as you and I both know, on both sides of the aisle. But I will say that nobody has held Labor accountable for this ethereal $275 not landing in the pocket of Australians. To be fair, there has been energy relief, but it's been highly targeted and highly means-tested. Labor is very good at promising all things to all people, and only some people in some categories get little bits and pieces of that promise.
Hey, none of that counts. None of that counts. Handing out more taxpayers' dollars to subsidise people, that doesn't count for it. That's not reducing power prices. That's not what was promised. Have a look. Here's what was promised.
Reducing power prices by $275.
By 2025, $275 a year.
$275 a year.
We'll get power prices down by $275 a year.
That's the promise, Kristy. Not we're going to borrow more taxpayers' money and subsidise your bills. It's about lowering prices. And they've done nothing in that. It's gone in the opposite direction. Yes, indeed. We will see. It's just absolutely extraordinary. I want to get Liz Storer on this particular issue. I think she's having trouble getting plugged in to join us, but it is extraordinary. They can promise that. I've seen some media, can I mention them? Dare I mention the national broadcaster at the ABC? They've sort of talked about that promise, Kristy, and suggested, it's too early to tell. The promise is for this term of government. You never know. Well, they've got to first reduce power prices by about $300 a year from just to get back where they started. Then they've got to go there $275. They ain't doing it. That is a broken promise, pure and simple.
I think it is. And sitting here in the heat wave that Sydney's having at the moment, as you likely are, here in Victoria as well, I would like to see $275 in my pocket, because I know we'll be paying for South Australia as well. With our energy prices here in Victoria.
It is. Liz Storer, host of the Late Debate, joins us now. Liz, thanks for joining us. You've got to tell us your take on this this fanciful economics from Chris Bowen, where he's given up on all the scares about the environment and safety, apparently, but apparently nuclear is going to cost too much, despite the fact that it seems to work perfectly in plenty of other countries.
Well, it's still going to cost less than renewables, Chris, if you believe the article published today that said once they're finished with that, it'll have cost $79 trillion once they're finished with all the infrastructure, all the new plants, so to speak, whether it's wind turbine farms, clearing all the land required for these battery farms, etc., and so on. And we know that the current expenditure for renewables, we're not talking about baseload electricity. So we're destroying the baseload power, and we're not replacing apples with apples. Nuclear would do that for us. Nuclear is currently responsible for over 20% of the world's supply. That's a lot of power. And we're still these flogs living in a great Western country who aren't taking any benefit from that, despite the fact we've got over a third of the world's uranium deposits right under our feet here in Australia. And I'd love to know who's done the modelling, this modelling that Bowen is talking about, because this government has not had a lot of luck with their modelling. It has time and time again turned out to be an absolute joke. So I want to know who's done the modelling. And lastly, even if the numbers that he's talking, which is a large sum of money, is true, what he's not factoring in, what nobody seems to be factoring in, is it wouldn't be the taxpayer wholly and solely forking that out. They're saying this would cost each taxpayer $25,000. That is, of course, a lot of money, but we know that the market would step in. We know that the energy companies would be digging deep. They'd want a very large slice of this pie, and if we just lift the moratorium, the free market would take care of itself.